Let me introduce to you, first of all, David Roman, the Chief Marketing Officer of Lenovo. Come on up, David. Have a seat. And Mr. Paul Fox, who's the Director of Corporate Communications for Procter & Gamble. Paul, come on up. A special round for Paul, who agreed at the last minute, foolish man, to do this. Thank you, Paul. As Paul just said, today's topic, it's not a campaign, it's a conversation, what marketing can learn from public relations. You know, it's interesting, as technology has changed, and even as many of our own business models have changed, this line between marketing and communications is blurring. But at the same time, the primary practitioners of these two disciplines have remained separate, either philosophically, strategically, tactically, and yes, even functionally. So today we're going to talk about that a little bit. I might be able to provoke a cage match, Ali versus Fraser 2 or 3. But first of all, what I'd like to do at Makovsky, my company, where I am the head of the digital branding practice, we conducted an online survey of 175 marketing and communications client-side people, those above the level of vice president. And we asked them a number of questions here. So to start it off, I want to share a few of our findings, just a few, and then we'll tee it up for a discussion with our panel, and then we will open it up to questions from the audience as well. So as I said, we had an online survey, 175 respondents, vice president above. Some of them were identified as public relations, some were identified as marketing, and some were identified as integrated communications. And one of the questions we asked was, what can marketing learn from public relations? Provocative question and some interesting answers. We actually got a lot of answers. Some things you would expect, engagement with the stakeholders, the value of earned media, but what I want to point at in particularly are two things, which are two sides of the same coin. 83% of those we talked to said that reputation is the consequence of authentic behavior of the organization, is something that marketing people need to learn. Can I get an amen? We also, 85% of them said the power of storytelling is something that marketers need to learn, the power of storytelling. Interesting. Now, on the other side of the coin, though, what can public relations learn from marketing? A lot fewer answers, but they were grouped around the same kinds of things. Communicating the message isn't enough, action is required. You need to look at each product or service as a business in itself. But again, the main point that seemed to come out, 63% said public relations needs to learn how to add quantifiable value. And 78% said data and analytics must shape decision-making. Two sides of the same coin. Hard data for marketing people versus soft data, which just seemed to be the province of public relations. Just to stir the pot a little bit, we also asked, in what areas do CMOs and CCOs work well together? Got a few good answers, but primarily in the area of corporate and brand identity is where it seems like CCOs and CMOs are in good alignment. And of course, we had to ask the other way, in what areas do they not work well together? And again, one major thing struck out, the struggle for ownership of the web and social media. This is a constant source of friction between CMOs and CCOs. Are you finding this yourself in your own world? Yes? Lastly, we asked, what is driving this greater collaboration between marketing and communications? And the answer is, well, what a surprise, the web. The things that came up in the increased voice of the consumer due to online conversations. Highly visible crises brought on by greater transparency. But the number one answer was there is a growing impact of reputation on consumers' buying decisions. Reputation is now being factored in to the buying decision. So, with that, I'm going to sit down with the gentleman and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Let's start with you, Paul, because you're the new guy.
I am.
Now, you come from Procter & Gamble, which is known for its marketing culture. It's very strong. It's taught in schools and everything.
That's very astute of you, Tim.
Thank you.
It's right out of the gate.
Thank you. When you see this kind of thing with the battle between communications and marketing, is this something you run into as well?
I think everybody does. And Mark laid out a few of the ground rules this morning, I think, and did a very good job of it. But I think what you're seeing more, I think this is, Mark's message this morning, was this integration of the two disciplines. Yeah, I mean, there are always going to be battle lines, and, we're a very large marketing organization. That's no secret to everybody. But I think the power of public relations has always been there. Right? And, we have to, as a profession, as an industry, we sort of have to break out of this second-class citizen type of approach. It's almost like you're at the wedding at the back of the room waiting to catch the bouquet that shoots out, and you're hoping you're the one that catches it. I think those times are changing now, and PR really does have a profound seat at the table. We can show the value of it. There are things, obviously in the research you laid out there, which I don't think is a great surprise to anybody in this room. PR has been chasing this idea, how do we quantify our work? The power of storytelling. And I think in every session so far on day one, we've talked about storytelling and the power of the narrative as if it's something new. I've been in this PR business for 30 plus years. And it's not new. I mean, you go back to the dawn of mankind. We used to take that charcoal out of the fire and write things on the cave wall and draw pictures because we wanted to share things. Right? This conversation, we wanted to share, and things become real when we share them. Right? That's why we do it. Right? Things that are locked up in our heads, the ideas that we have, they only become real when we share. So it's instinctive for us to be able to communicate. So I don't think it's a new idea. What we've got today, of course, is the ability to communicate almost instantly to almost anybody on the face of the planet. And I think that is the big challenge. And I'm sure we're going to come on to who wins in terms of who owns social media. And I've got a few thoughts about that, but maybe later.
We'll circle back around to that. Right. Now, David, your background is marketing for Lenovo, for Apple, for high-tech companies, where public relations has always been a very important part of the marketing mix. And with Apple, they practically don't do any more brand advertising at all. What are your experiences with public relations, and how has it come into the marketing function that you've driven?
Well, as you say, I mean, I think in the technology space, just the way technology companies operate, people buy a Lenovo computer. I mean, so the name of the company is there, and PR is probably the main thing that you do, because you don't have big advertising budgets typically. I mean, now it's getting bigger, but so PR has always been well integrated. Having said that, I do think that over the last few years it has changed, and actually it's become even more integrated. Yeah. And it's because of the web. And I guess, two things have happened. One is, there is nowhere to hide. I mean, all companies now are out there. Everything that you do is very visible. Transparency is not it's one of those things that you want to do. You have no choice. I mean, if you can't hide from anything. So you have to be much more open to this fact that you don't really control that message. You can help shape it. But basically, you have to act the way you want the market to perceive you, and the marketing functions, the PR function, is helping fine-tune that and making sure that you get it right through the right storytelling, through the right thing. But by and large, I mean, you have to do the right thing. With the youth market, even more so, because we've always had word of mouth was the one of the key ways in which people get information about technology. But with the youth market, it's gone even further. I mean, the peer opinion is almost everything in terms of buying a new smartphone, buying a new PC. So just working with this broad community and helping engage them with the message is even more significant. So I think that integration has actually become even more significant over the last few years.
Now, as a marketing director, when public relations practitioners come to you, what do you need from them to make sure that this is something that's going to work for you?
What I need them to do is not to get lost, because sometimes, my experience is that PR people can get too lost in the story, and need them to stay focused on where the company wants to go. So you're doing something for a purpose and stay focused on that purpose. And I think although that sounds obvious, sometimes it does become a bit confusing. And just as I think some of the marketing people sort of are so focused on the purpose that they lose the connection with the audience and lose the story, I think sometimes PR people do go the other way and tend to get caught up in the story and sort of lose the purpose of where you want to take it, what you want to get out of it. We had an example recently, actually, something that quite frankly caught me by surprise. Our CEO chose to give away his bonus to the 10,000 lowest paid people in the company, and he didn't want it to be publicized. It was his thing. It was just a personal thing that he did. He just thought it was the right thing to do, and it actually became a big story, partly because we didn't want to make it a story, and it got out, and then we were sort of chasing it, trying to figure out, well, are we trying to do something with this? And in the end, I mean, we decided we're not. I mean, it's him. He did that because that's who he is. That's the way he looks at the company. It's not something that we should try and drive as a company initiative or anything like that. In fact, we shouldn't even communicate it as a company thing, and sort of removed ourselves completely from it. And I think that was the right thing to do. But there was a big difference on the marketing people did want to push that very hard, and the PR people actually there were absolutely right, saying no, it's not our story. It's just something that happened. It's something that he did. Don't do anything. Don't take it out at all.
Interesting. Have you encountered that kind of friction between communications and marketing?
No, I don't think so. I think our PR teams and our marketing teams, the brand teams themselves, are they're highly integrated. They all sit at the same table. So what we chase after is the big idea, right? And we don't care where it comes from. As long as it is a big idea, it's compelling, it's authentic, and it doesn't matter which side of the table generates it. And I think, that's been the way that we've been working for a long, long time. And we've not really seen that conflict that you talk about. Yeah, sure, there's some serious arguments about where the budgets flow. But if it's the right thing to do, then we're going to do it. And I think, you've seen some of the examples of those programs. But, one of the things that we're constantly trying to look for is this conversation, right? And whoever generates that conversation helps to maintain it. And I think, you've seen some very good examples of that. The funniest one I saw recently was Old Spice, and it's produced some iconic marketing advertising programs. But the most recent one, I think it got a fair amount of ink, was a conversation that was happening between Old Spice on Twitter and Taco Bell. I don't know whether anybody remembers that, where the Old Spice team shot the Taco Bell team a tweet that says, hey, do you really put fire in your hot sauce? It's the absolute equity of Old Spice to be cheeky out there. And of course, Taco Bell jumped in and did exactly the same thing and said, do you guys put Old Spices in your Old Spice? So, but it's that sort of conversation that you're trying to create, because it's totally on equity for those brands to be able to do it. And that's one of the strengths I think you get when you get the communicators and the marketers together to establish, what is our brand voice, what is our equity. I think we'll chase after that. But once we've got that, that allows you to start expressing and communicating in a very different way.
So you've made a structural change to accommodate that.
We have. I mean, in the last 12 months, we've taken the communications function and put it within the brand building organization. Mm-hmm. Because that's the goal that we're all chasing down, is to build the brand. And whatever discipline that you want to look at, whether it's communications above or below the line, it's all pursuing the same goal. So it was a very deliberate move that we made to bring everything together. It's still highly professionalized, of course, but it's a very clear signal to the organization that we're part of the same team, we're chasing the same goals, and I think it's working really well. Really well.
I just wanted to pick up on a point that Paul made, actually, that I think is a very significant shift that I've seen in my experience, is that on the marketing side, we used to focus entirely on this story, and you would sort of craft this storyline of the brand image is sort of built on that. I think it's now increasingly, it's the personality, it's the attitude of the company, because you don't control all the elements of the story. But the personality has got to be real, and the attitude has got to be real. And understanding that well, so then you can build on that. And like your example of your Taco Bell and Allspice, when you know the personality and your audiences start to understand that personality, that actually survives and is much more enduring than the actual details of the story, because then it starts to shape any story that comes out. And that's where, again, I think there's a lot of commonality, and that's where the PR team is very good at that personality, that attitude, understanding that, capturing that.
Well, I wanted to ask you on that same subject, is your company as fully integrated across disciplines, as perfectly harmonious as Procter & Gamble is, or do we have...
I think even more so, absolutely. No, we are. We really are. I mean, this is one where this integration is not one of the things that worries us. We have much bigger issues in terms of integration. One of them is integrating the products with marketing. There are other things that keep us up at night, but the integration of marketing with PR is not a major issue.
Interesting. I want to come back to something you said about the big idea.
Mm-hmm.
Full disclosure, most of my career was spent on the advertising side of the business, so I come from the dark side, and we constantly dealt in big ideas. And I noticed that many public relations firms are just coming to that as a construct, bigger than any specific tactical program that they might do. Have you found that to be the case?
Yeah, we have, and we've deliberately gone out and tried to encourage it from our our agency partners, because there's no reason why all of our agencies can't come up with that that big idea. There's no barrier there in terms of creativity. I know a lot of agencies today are investing in that creative side of the program, but I think there's absolutely no reason that I can think of anyway, why we could sit at a campaign meeting and look at a brand and an idea flow across the table, and it comes from one of our PR agencies. And we're trying to deliberately create that environment that we're agnostic about where the idea comes from, as long as it's on equity and it looks like something that could be big and enduring and authentic, and create these conversations that we want to try and maintain.
Well, speaking of agnosticism, at Lenovo, who owns the website? Who owns the social media function?
It's a good question, because we're moving it around. So we had social media was part of PR. We took it out and sort of created a separate group on its own. Now we're actually looking at moving back actually as it grows, as it becomes something that takes over everything. We're looking at splitting the component parts, because there's a part that is focused on analytics, on actually tracking information and so on, and we're moving that into a specific analytics team. But we are moving back the people that really are communicating with the audience into PR. Incidentally, one of the reasons why we looked at this in the first instance and looked at moving it is that we didn't want the people from Lenovo that were communicating to others outside to be doing it from a PR mindset. We wanted them to be doing it from the company mindset and saying, if you want to have an engagement, a conversation, it really should be people from many different parts of the company. So you have these Lenovo ambassadors, and we wanted more to coordinate these people that would actually respond to postings and engage in Twitter and so on, but they would do it from the perspective of their discipline, not from a polished PR perspective. And I think now that we've gotten that mindset, PR still is a good place to house that, but looking at it quite differently than how we would do other parts of PR, and that we're not trying to control that message that much, not trying to polish it, but we are trying to make sure that there's consistency. It reflects the attitude, the personality of the company. We say it the right way, but not trying to control the message that much.
It's interesting. You've almost talked about things in terms of infrastructure and content. I ask you the same question. Who owns it at P&G?
I think we're very similar in many respects. So I think a lot of the early days, some of the brands like Old Spice, like Pampers, really championed the use of that social media online space. And they did it from a brand perspective, very marketing driven. But I think as it grew and we put in assets behind those brands like community managers to have these conversations, this always on type conversation, it began to change, and most recently to try and clarify, and brush away some of this fog or blow away some of this fog about who owns what. We made a very clear declaration that the communications function owns the social media dialogue. That doesn't mean the brands are not going to do the things that they used to do in terms of the online campaigns, of course, but the conversation, the social media conversation, that's owned by communications these days. And I think it's an exciting, new frontier, and I think it's something that we are constantly learning from. We're constantly surprised by the level of engagement that we get. I can remember, this goes back some years, but when we put community managers onto the Pampers business. Now Pampers is a $10 billion brand. I mean, it's bigger than a lot of our competitors, entire companies, that single brand. But it's deeply entrenched, and I guess we could have a show of hands that probably the first man-made object to touch most of this audience was probably a Pampers diaper, believe it or not. But the conversation, no, not today, I hope. No, but when we put community managers onto that brand, then they started the conversations and listening to what was happening. The important thing was to listen first, right? Listen to the conversations and see the pace of things. So to learn from it, and then when they began to engage, the reaction that we got was astonishing. I can remember one conversation that was really relayed back to me, which was, a mom that was somewhat upset with the diaper, and it was, she said it was leaking. It wasn't the sort of quality she would expect. Now, as Mark talked this morning about those sort of conversations, we normally never hear about, right? Today, we see it in full Technicolor, and the community manager engaged with that consumer and said, hey, I'm sorry to hear about that. Can you tell me, what the issue is? How old's your son? And it turned out that the diaper was too small. Right? Mom was buying the diapers that were actually too small for the baby. So she said, try the larger size, because I think that's going to be a lot better. So we turned this individual from somebody who was fairly critical of the brand to a real advocate. Because frankly, she was really, really surprised that the brand had come out of the ether, as it were, onto her desktop, and she was talking directly to the brand. And it was a brand that was talking back to her in a voice that she recognized. It was the on equity for the Pampers. It was caring. They only wanted to help. Well, that was it.
Fascinating. Now I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience in just a moment. But one last thought here. What has surprised you most over the past few years in the role of how public relations has changed vis-a-vis marketing?
I'm not sure it's so much your public relations, but what has surprised me is just how engaged our users are, or how much some of them want to be engaged with the company and with other users like them, but around the products that they're using. People really do care, and they like to talk to others about it. As Paul says, they're surprised when you sort of participate in that conversation, very pleasantly surprised. And I guess I find that actually, it continues to amaze me just how passionate people are about the products that they use, what they do with them, how others like them are using them, and that's it's a tremendous inspiration for things to do. It gives you lots of ideas from a product standpoint, but also it really changes the whole communications flow, because you're not just trying to come up with the thing that's going to appeal to them. You're just listening to what really interests them and feeding it back.
And you?
I think I'm surprised that people aren't more brave from an agency perspective. I think we can get crushed under the weight of analytics and data. I think if you have an idea and your gut tells you it's a good idea, then absolutely try and chase it down a little bit and dig underneath it just to make sure it has got some sort of foundation to the idea. But I think if your gut tells you it's a good idea, it probably is, right? And to be brave, to come up with that idea that may be a little bit edgy, push the envelope a little bit more. But that's the sort of thing that we're certainly looking for. Courage, bravery, that big idea that, you know, thanks Mom. I mean, at the end of the day, that is such a profound idea, if you like, you know, that goes to the core of what our business is. And you can see that campaign started in 2010. It rolled out and got even bigger in 2012. We'll see new iterations of it as we move through, 13 and 14 and go to Sochi in Russia and then Rio for the Summer Olympics. It's a campaignable idea, but it's a big conversation. People talk about it.
Thanks. Well, I'd like to open it up to questions, and I have to admit I have failed because I wanted to get a little more aggression between these two. Perhaps someone here has some provocative questions?
Okay, I'll do my best to be provocative. So, full disclosure, I run a integrated marketing communication group, everything from employee communications through investor relations, advertising, events, and sponsorships. Do you think in 10 years' time, we're not going to be attending a PR summit anymore? We're all going to be at a communication summit?
No.
We're all gathered here looking at our navel. And I get the fact that functional discipline will continue to exist. You're going to continue to have people that are experts in a discipline. But I run a communication function. I make a decision on if I have a challenge, a business challenge, a product to sell. I then decide what's the best mix. In the end, it's communications. So in 10 years' time, is this not going to be a communication summit?
Where I thought you were going to go is saying, we're going to have these hybrid sort of marketing people who are also PR people who also handled IR. That I would disagree with. Right? I don't think that's going to happen. I think, our industry goes back a long, long, long way. And if anything, I'm on a quest to even more professionalize the PR industry. Mm-hmm. Because I think, we could benefit from some of the disciplines of our marketing friends. And I think they can benefit from some of the innate storytelling that PR can generate. I think you're going to see a much greater and tighter integration between the disciplines that we broadly call, marketing, whether it's, advertising or PR. But one of the things that I do hope we see in the next 10 years, in fact, I hope we see it faster than a decade, I really want us to innovate. At the core of what P&G does, they say, innovation is P&G's lifeblood. It is, But the PR industry needs to innovate. We need to think of new ways of communicating. We need to break down barriers. I see it a lot in other disciplines. I see less of it in PR. And that's what I hope that we see very quickly, is that we really put some traction behind innovating in our industry, really breaking the mold and doing different things.
Another question?
Thanks for that. Controversy. I also work, probably not quite the size of Procter & Gamble, but who is, a global multinational with lots of consumer brands, but I'm head of corporate communication. Now, I look at your fantastic example of using the Rockefeller Center to make people like Procter & Gamble, but I took the opportunity of the coffee break to ask a nice lady who I didn't know at all, but she answered me. I said, "You've got nice hair." "Thank you," she said, looking a bit worried. Does your shampoo choice be affected by the fact that the multinational behind it sponsors people's mums? And she said, "No, of course not." Which, of course, I think was my guess. If your job is random goodwill for Procter & Gamble, I get it. But if I look at my corporate stakeholders, I'm not in Marcoms. I don't have a monolithic brand that actually whatever I do helps the consumer intimacy. I have something like 300 brands. It wouldn't help at all. There are the Marcoms folk, and then there are my stakeholders. And I wonder, looking at P&G at the moment, you're having a little bit of, well, a few issues on Wall Street.
They got better last week, I have to say.
You know, does that help? Does it, you know, when you're talking to NGOs, does that help? You know, where on the corporate communication stakeholder group list does something cool and nice, but what I would term random goodwill, help?
I think it's a very interesting question, and I think we could probably spend the rest of the morning talking about it. But I wouldn't characterize it as random goodwill. So I'm going to push back on that straight off and tell you there's a lot of thought that goes behind some of these acts of random goodwill. I think, you know, it's almost like, you know, a rising tide lifts all ships. Right? So I think it creates a landscape for us, the work that we do. We don't look for it to generate sales necessarily tomorrow or by the end of the week. It sets a landscape of which people understand a little bit more about P&G and trust us a little bit more. We spend about $2 billion every year on research. It's a lot of money. Because what we're after is those germs, those consumer insights that really do mean something to the lady that you spoke to at the break. You know, I can remember when we acquired the Riches and Vicks company, we acquired it principally to buy the Vicks business. That was the brand that we wanted out of that portfolio. Inside of inside of Riches and Vicks, there were two other brands, effectively unknown. One was Olay, right? And the other one was Pantene. Right? Now, you know, both of those brands have become billion-dollar brands. They've become market leaders in their own right. But on Pantene, when we took that tiny little brand, it was unknown anywhere else in the world outside Asia, we tried to find a consumer insight that would resonate. Right? And it sounds very simple today when I share it, but it was profound back then. And when we asked women about their hair, there became apparent a very common denominator about what they thought meant healthy hair. And it was hair that shone. You know, it was shiny hair. If they had shiny hair, equaled healthy hair. So if we could create a brand around that and show the shine on the hair, it would mean something. And that single insight propelled a very small regional brand to become a global powerhouse with several billion dollars in sales. So it's those insights that we're after, and they resonate right up to the P&G brand. I mean, we've been looking at the P&G brand really intensely for the last 2.5 years to see what role that it will play and what platform we could do. We took it out for the first time in 2010 with the Vancouver Olympics to create that multi-brand platform and begin to talk about P&G. I think you're going to hear a lot more of that in the months to come, not just because we're 175 years old this week, but you're going to see us more generating stories around P&G and what it stands for. And I think it creates a platform. It creates a platform not just for the brands. It creates a platform for all our engagement with stakeholders. But from a corporate standpoint, yeah, I mean, we do think about consumers, but we think about some of the other stakeholders that you identified, like our friends on Wall Street, some of the NGOs. They get a lot of our attention in corporate.
Other questions?
Okay, this is for Paul. So staying on the moms and the kind of the corporate platform debate. So sponsorships cost a lot of money. So P&G spend a lot of money to get a top IOC sponsorship, and you guys don't do anything without kind of measuring and looking at ROI, et cetera. And Mark talked about how he thinks that sponsorship, at least last year, might have had a $500 million impact on sales. Given this is a marketing versus communications kind of debate, and P&G is a very analytic organization, what kind of back and forth has marketing had with PR at P&G about analyzing and measuring a sponsorship like that? And Mark said he challenged the PR industry to actually think more about how you measure yourself and the value you can put on it. How would you place a value on the PR element and the earned media element of that sponsorship, if you have?
Oh, I think it was astonishing in terms of value. Yeah, people reference the Thanks Mom advertising that we did, but the reality is the entire Olympic program was launched and propelled by PR. It started months in advance of the Summer Olympics, and it led all the way up to then the launch of the marketing campaign when that kicked in. So, in my opinion, I think PR probably carried the significant level of the Olympic campaign to a height that we'd certainly not seen. We didn't even see it in Vancouver. I mean, London set a totally different benchmark, one that we'll strive to beat in Sochi and one we'll strive to beat again in Rio. And I can tell you, PR will play a fundamental role in those big programs. But it's not just about the Olympics. There are other, big, powerful programs that are either supporting brands or P&G in a whole, some of which you'll see soon. But I can tell you that PR is either they're at the front burning that trail that our marketing friends will then follow and build on. But it is just fundamental. I think we need to do a much better job at the analytics side of things, and I know that's a holy grail that I've been pursuing probably for my entire career, to try and get those analytics so we can sit down. But I think we have a seat at the table now, right? We've shown the value, and I think if you look at P&G, because of its history, where you started this conversation, we're a marketing company, yeah, fine, we created the concept of brand building, but PR has a seat at the table at P&G. It has several seats, I'd have to say.
Thanks. Question up here.
My question is linked to what you just said. You said P&G is always in search for a big idea, and that you don't actually care where this idea is coming from, whether from advertising agencies or PR agencies. My question for you is whether you give the same opportunity for PR agencies to come with big ideas. Do you brief the agencies in the same time, or PR agencies are always briefed, as in my experience happens many times with many clients, after the advertising are coming with a big idea for the strategy? Thank you.
I think today, the answer to your question is we can do a better job. Right? And I don't think we're there yet. I think some of the brands are. Some of the brands have really wrapped their hands around this whole concept. Others haven't. Others are, but they'll get there. They'll get there because, they will see their fellow brands doing things that they think, that's pretty cool, right? And then they'll replicate that, and I think it's almost viral, right? I don't think we're there right now. But, some of these insights that we get can be PR driven. I was in, a few years ago, I was in Moscow in a typical Stalin-built apartment block just on the outskirts of Moscow. And if you've ever been in Moscow in those sort of tenement-type buildings, they string washing lines between the buildings, and they're on pulleys. Moscow gets pretty cold in the winter. I think that comes as no surprise. So in the winter, you see these totally frozen lines of washing that go out. And you think that's a pretty crazy thing. But they don't have dryers or anything. That's the way that they, get their clothes dry. And so they'll pull in these incredibly stiff shirts that's sort of like this and sheets. But the insight that we got from it, when we talked to, like, why do you do that? Why don't you just leave it in the house and let the warm air in the house dry it? And they said, because the clothes smell a very unique way when we hang them on the line, and they get this cold impact of sub-zero temperatures. The clothes smell of it. And you try and winkle it out a little bit. Well, what do they smell like? And you get this, well, they sort of smell frosty, and it's a very unique property. So, we bring that insight back and tell our scientists, we need you to create a fragrance, because, P&G is a very big fragrance house. We need you to create a fragrance, a scent, that smells frosty. And, that's the challenge we throw out to them. And then they come back and they bring lots of bottles out, and we have consumer panels, and we could take it back to Moscow and say, does this smell frosty to you? And when we get the answer, that's what it smells like. Then we put it in a laundry detergent, and people love it. It became the #1 product in Russia as far as laundry is concerned.
I apologize. I have to cut you off. They're about to sound a truly heinous klaxon to tell me to wrap this up. So thank you all for coming, and hope this was informative. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, David. Thank you all.